During the Vietnam War, American soldiers had a name for the old cargo plane circling above them after dark: Puff the Magic Dragon. It was not fast, it was not modern. It was a transport designed from the Second World War rebuilt to do something the jets above Vietnam could not do: remain over one position for hours, illuminate the darkness, and keep three side-mounted miniguns aimed at the same patch of ground. But Puff carried the weapons that made it so effective inside its own thin aluminum fuselage, tens of thousands of cartridges and dozens of magnesium flares. On February 24, 1969, one of those flares was accidentally armed inside an AC-47 with the call sign Spooky 71. Every enlisted man in the cargo compartment had been wounded. The airman farthest from the flare had more than 40 fragment wounds in his back and legs. He could not stand. His name was John Levitow. The flare weighed 27 pounds. In no more than 20 seconds, it would ignite at roughly 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit beside thousands of rounds of loose ammunition. To understand what Levitow did next, you first have to understand the strange machine he was trying to save, and how the weapon Puff used to take darkness away from the enemy became a time bomb inside the aircraft. The airplane began as a C-47 Skytrain, a transport that had carried paratroopers and cargo through the Second World War. The airframe, flying as Spooky 71, had been delivered in 1944. 2 decades later, Vietnam presented a different problem. Fast jets struck hard, but had to make repeated passes. An outpost under attack at night needed an aircraft that could remain overhead. The answer was almost counterintuitive. Take an old, slow transport and point its weapons sideways. 3 7.62mm miniguns were mounted along the aircraft's left side. The pilot aimed and fired them through a cockpit sight. The gunners in back kept them fed and operating. To attack, the pilot held a level turn of roughly 30 degrees at about 140 miles per hour. The left side remained angled toward the center, keeping all 3 guns trained near the same point. This was the gunship idea. The airplane moved continuously, but its fire remained concentrated. Each minigun could fire approximately 3,000 or 6,000 rounds per minute. At maximum output, the 3 produced 18,000 rounds per minute, enough to affect the aircraft's turn. Crews rarely needed it. Even at the lower rate, a 3-second burst could distribute roughly 1 projectile into every square foot of an area the size of a football field. From below at night, tracer rounds looked like streams of red fire bending from the sky. Together with an early radio call sign and the popular song, that image helped create the name Puff the Magic Dragon. Officially, the aircraft became the AC-47 Spooky. To soldiers defending a position in the dark, the name mattered less than the sound of its 2 engines arriving overhead. But the guns could only dominate what the crew could locate. Puff still needed a way to see through the night. Later gunships carried sophisticated sensors. The AC-47 relied on racks of Mk-24 magnesium flares, manually prepared and thrown through an open cargo door. The Mk-24 was no handheld signal flare. It was a metal cylinder over 3 feet long, about 5 inches wide, and 27 pounds. Beneath its parachute, it could burn for up to 3 minutes at about 2 million candle power. Levitow described the effect simply. It would light up, about half a mile, a good area, quite brightly. One flare could expose mortar flashes, movement, and terrain that had been invisible seconds earlier. As it drifted beneath the parachute, Puff orbited the illuminated ground with its weapons pointed inward. Light and fire were parts of the same system. Deploying one required 2 men. The loadmaster set 2 delays, then passed the cylinder to a gunner near the door. A lanyard pulled the safety pin after the flare had moved away from the aircraft. The first delay provided about 10 seconds before a small charge deployed the parachute. A second delay provided roughly 10 more seconds before the magnesium ignited. Outside the airplane, those 20 seconds were a safety system. The flare fell clear, its parachute opened, and only then did it become a brilliant artificial sun. Inside the airplane, the same sequence meant disaster. Burning magnesium could fill the bay with toxic smoke, ignite ammunition, or burn through the aluminum floor and destroy the control cables. Surrounded by more flares, ammunition, and aviation fuel, it had several ways to bring the aircraft down. Puff's greatest advantage at night was also one of the most dangerous objects aboard. That was the aircraft 23-year-old John Levitow knew from 180 combat missions, On this night, however, he was not flying with his normal crew. Levitow was filling in for another loadmaster, returning a favor to a man who had covered for him when he was sick. Major Kenneth Carpenter was flying his first combat mission as an aircraft commander. Their assignment was a 6-hour patrol over the Saigon region on the second day of the 1969 Tet counteroffensive. Viet Cong units were striking American installations with rockets and mortars after dark. For that kind of attack, the AC-47 was one of the most useful aircraft available. At about 11:30, Spooky 71 was diverted to Long Binh Army Post beside its home base at Bien Hoa. A large fight was visible along the perimeter. Carpenter placed the gunship into its firing orbit. The flares revealed the ground. The left side guns concentrated on the mortar position below. By the second firing pass, the attack had been silenced. The system had worked exactly as designed, light first, then sustained fire from above. When the attack paused, a nearby ground unit requested more illumination. In the cargo bay, Levitow set the timers on a flare. Gunner Ellis Owen connected the lanyard and prepared to throw the cylinder through the open door. Then a second mortar battery began firing about a mile south of the first. Carpenter leveled the wings and turned toward the new flashes. Small arms fire climbed into the aircraft's path. Spooky 71 was flying at approximately 3,500 feet. The gunship had been built to circle over men who needed help. That also made a slow aircraft vulnerable. This time, it flew directly into the path of a single 82mm mortar round. The mortar struck the top of the right wing. A blinding flash filled the aircraft. The explosion opened a hole roughly 2 feet across in the wing. More than 3,500 fragment perforations were later counted. The shockwave threw the cargo crew into the floor and walls. Every enlisted man in the rear was wounded. The airplane veered right and down as Carpenter fought the controls. Levitow later said the impact felt as if someone had struck the entire right side of his body with a heavy piece of lumber. More than 40 fragments entered his back and legs. He was bleeding and had partially lost feeling in his right leg. His first movement was not toward the flare. Another wounded airman lay close to the open cargo door. With the aircraft lurching, Levitow dragged him toward the center of the compartment. Then he saw blue smoke. At the instant of the explosion, Owen had the lanyard connected and a finger through the safety pin ring. The flare was torn from his hands. His finger remained in the ring. The safety pin came out. The two-stage sequence the crew had performed night after night had begun, but the cylinder had never left the airplane. The armed flare rolled between the forward minigun and ammunition scattered by the blast. Navigator William Platt later estimated that 19,000 live rounds lay near it. No one knew when the pin had been pulled. No one knew how much of the 20 seconds remained. The flare would not remain still. Carpenter had the damaged aircraft in the 30-degree bank, struggling to keep it under control. As Spooky 71 rolled and shook, the 3-foot cylinder moved from side to side across the floor. Levitow tried to stand. His right leg would not support him, so he crawled. He was farther from the flare than anyone else in the compartment. Around him, every enlisted crewman was wounded. Dense blue smoke poured from the fuse. The timer might still provide the full 20 seconds, or the impact might have damaged it. Reaching the flare did not solve the problem. The cylinder was too large and heavy to control. Each movement sent it rolling away. Levitow could not brace on his injured leg or lift the flare and carry it, so he changed the problem. Instead of trying to pick up the flare, Levitow threw his entire body over it. With the cylinder pinned beneath him, he pulled himself backward toward the open door, dragging his wounded body and the 27-pound device across the banking aircraft. His route would later remain visible in blood across the cargo bay. At the rear of the compartment, propeller wash tore through the open doorway. Levitow forced the flare toward it. The cylinder cleared the aircraft. At almost the same instant, the parachute charge separated and the magnesium ignited outside. The device designed to turn darkness into daylight did exactly that. But the light was behind Spooky 71, not inside it. The ammunition did not cook off. The floor did not burn through. The control cables remained intact. No one aboard could know whether Levitow had used 19 seconds or every fraction of the 20th. They knew only that the flare became a sun after it cleared the door. He had saved all 8 men, but he had not yet saved the airplane. The damaged aircraft responded unpredictably, and 140-pound ammunition containers could become projectiles if they broke loose. Levitow regained enough control of his legs to help wedge the cans between the guns. Carpenter later said he considered the fact that the aircraft continued flying a miracle. Then the crew found aviation gasoline leaking from the right side. An internal tank had also ruptured and, for reasons never made clear, still contained isopropyl alcohol. The gunship that had escaped a 4,000-degree fire was now leaking two flammable liquids. Ahead was Bien Hoa. Between the town and the airbase lay an old French minefield that had never been cleared. If Spooky 71 came down short, its crew would land among buried explosives. Near a stall, the AC-47 barely cleared the minefield and reached the runway overrun. Carpenter brought it down in a full, shuddering stall. The right tire had been cut by fragments. He stood on the left brake, fighting to hold the airplane straight until it finally stopped. The control tower instructed him to taxi. With gasoline and alcohol still leaking, Carpenter refused. The crew evacuated where the aircraft stood. Only then, after the mortar hit, the loose flare, the damaged wing, the leaking fuel, the minefield, and the flat tire, was the mission over. Carpenter had called for an ambulance and a medical helicopter. Levitow refused a helicopter until Carpenter ordered him aboard. Doctors removed 40 pieces of shrapnel from between Levitow's knee and hip. After almost 2 months recovering in Japan, he returned to Vietnam into combat flying. Levitow completed 2 more missions. When he arrived for a third, his commander stopped him. At Carpenter's urging, the recommendation had been upgraded from the Air Force Cross to the Medal of Honor. A Medal of Honor nominee was no longer permitted to fly in combat. Statements came from the crew. The aircraft carried the blast damage, and Levitow's path remained marked across its floor. Carpenter emphasized one fact: other men were present and wounded, but Levitow had been farthest from the danger. He was the man who recognized it and moved while seconds counted. Then Air Force bureaucracy produced one final contradiction. At the end of his tour, lost advancement paperwork left Levitow without the technical level required for promotion or reenlistment. The Airman, being considered for the nation's highest military decoration, was technically ineligible to remain in the Air Force. The problem was corrected the next day with a retroactive promotion, but Levitow had decided to leave active service. President Richard Nixon presented the Medal of Honor to him at the White House on May 14, 1970. Levitow became the first enlisted member of the independent United States Air Force to receive the Medal of Honor. He later spent more than 22 years in Veterans Affairs. His name was placed on an Enlisted Honor Graduate Award and a C-17 called the Spirit of John L. Levitow. The AC-47 also left a larger legacy. It proved that a slow transport flying in circles could deliver accurate, sustained fire in a way fast jets could not. The AC-119 and AC-130 gunships that followed were more powerful and more sophisticated, but their basic lineage began with the old C-47 and its guns pointing out the side. Puff the Magic Dragon became legendary because it combined 2 simple ideas. First, light the darkness. Then keep the guns trained on what the light revealed. Over Long Binh, the first half of that system nearly destroyed the second. A flare built to illuminate half a mile of battlefield was armed inside an aluminum aircraft filled with ammunition and fuel. John Levitow could not stand. He was bleeding, partially numb, and farther from the danger than anyone else in the cargo bay. He still reached it, and when the night turned white, the light was outside the aircraft. If you want more forgotten war stories that sound impossible but really happened, subscribe and follow us.